Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we're going to take a dive into AIM's attribute system with inventory. If you're new to version 12, coming from version 11, this is hopefully going to make some sense as far as where some fields went that you might be used to in prior versions. And if you're brand new to AIM in general, well, we'll be rolling right through what attributes are. So with attributes, you can now establish any details you'd like to track with inventory as a searchable field, and these can be used for the benefit of your guided inventory filters on your e-commerce page if you're choosing to go down that route as well. Today, we're going to focus on just getting started with some features you can use right away, and then later on in future webinars, we'll expand on those functions. And as always, if you have any questions on the content, go ahead and type those questions into the questions box here in GoToWebinar's toolbar, and I'm going to do my best to answer those as we go along. Let's go ahead and get my screen shared, and we will just jump right into things. So you should now be seeing my TriTech University screen here. So this is basically my default system where I can go ahead and play around with all of these different functions. I also have several other copies of AIM available as well, one for the gun industry, one for the music industry. We're going to be kind of jumping back and forth in between those. But to get started with the concept of attributes for inventory, you will find these in your maintenance menu. So if we go into maintenance and then go into inventory, down here, you're going to see the option for setup attributes. Same concept if you go to the drop-down menus, maintenance, inventory, and setup attributes, same screen. Now, depending on your industry, there's going to be some attributes already in this system to help get you started. And I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So for example, in the music industry, let's go ahead and open up to that same menu. And here for music stores, you're going to see options for composer and arranger and artist and voicing, color and size and things like that. If you're coming from version 11, these fields should sound very familiar. These were in prior versions, just common fields that were in inventory in general, regardless of industry. We have now made these to be special attribute fields which are completely customizable. So what that means for you if you're a music store or any other store is you're no longer limited to just these fields. If you, for example, are a music store that kind of caters to pro audio and you'd like to track microphone frequencies and resistance meters and just kind of things of that nature, you can now create attributes for those and keep track of the values within those fields. Same thing for the firearms industry. Into guns and archery, if we take a look at that same field here for setup attributes, we now have specialized fields for caliber and finish and capacity. Moreover, with these attributes, you now have the ability to establish specific values so that there's less chance of confusion about what should go into these fields. Someone is saying that you can't see me talk, you can only see me talking, not the screen. You should be seeing my screen. I have that shared. Is anyone else being able to see my screen right now? Let me know in the questions area. You should be seeing that. So if you're joining us on a mobile platform, there may be an option to switch back and forth between my webcam and the screen, but you should be able to see both of those on the same screen. Other people are saying they can see the screen. So Linda, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn the webcam off momentarily, just so that way, hopefully that should switch you to seeing my screen exclusively. So let me know if you can see it now, and I will go right along. Okay, perfect. We are seeing it. Okay, so As I was explaining here with attributes, you now have the ability to establish specific values for that attribute. I'm going to use the gun industry here as an example. So with caliber and gauge highlighted, I'm going to go to this values tab. As a gun store, if you are a gun store joining us here today, you're going to find in this attributes area that we have pretty much every caliber already loaded for you. Now, that basically means that you can simply select it from a drop-down list when you're filling in those details on your inventory. It all is based on this setting here where it says attribute type. This is set specifically as user entry with predefined. And what that means is you have the ability not only to select from this listing of values, but you have the ability to type in your own should the value that you need not be already keyed in on the list. Now, for the most part, all of these other attributes are going to be simply as user entry. Like I said, you can actually define whatever attributes you feel that are valuable to you. So getting back to my training system, my TriTech University system here, I've just got a couple of other examples here. They're pretty humdrum comparatively, but the key elements of any attribute are a description, the attribute type, which you can see there are several other choices available to you. Probably the most common ones are user entry and user entry with predefined. If you would like to make sure that you are only allowing your staff to select the values that you've keyed in, you can also choose the option for predefined values exclusively. That way, whatever you put in on this value tab are the only options that your staff can choose from. This helps to eliminate the potential for lack of a better term, junk entries or potentially duplicate entries where one person types it in one way and another person types it in a slightly different way, as opposed to just selecting whatever you've got on the value listings. Other options that you can see are date selectors, numeric decimals, and numeric integers. So if you would like to limit it to just a date option, you can choose the date selector. This can be handy if you are tracking some kind of date value, such as maybe like an expiration date for inventory in here or something of that nature. The numeric options, if you just want to make sure that whatever is being keyed in is some kind of numeric value, either a whole number or something that has the ability to have decimals with it. Now, the other function for these attributes is they get attached to one or more subcategories. And by doing this, this helps you to specify where these values are appropriate. So in my example here for caliber, I've limited this to my firearms categories and subcategories. If I switch over to, say, color, I've got that on my guitars, on my vacuums, on my bicycles. If I look at finish, I've got that specific to band instruments. We loves our instruments, my precious, and appliances. So again, you can basically have this set up however you would like. Now, other functions that I'm not going to spend too much time on here, but that you may find handy are tag names and web types. So the tag name, when it comes to using this attribute for the purposes of printed reports or things of that nature, are how you would use that. So for example, in your area where you can go in and you can set up Word templates. And Word templates, if you're not familiar with those, are where you can set up basically printed documents that get generated when certain transactions happen, like layaways or other types of transactions like that. You can define the tag name that is used to pull the value into the printed document, so that way you can make sure you're specifying those details on your printouts. Likewise, for the web type, you've got two choices there basically, either don't send to web or use for guided navigation. We will cover our active e-commerce detail functions in way more detail in webinars down the line. But the basic premise of guided navigation is as such. If you've ever gone shopping on a major online retailer, let's say, for example, like Best Buy or Amazon or just kind of things like that. And I'm not going to bring them up here because I don't want to, offend anyone. But if you, for example, let's say you go to the Best Buy website and you are browsing their computer category. On the side of that screen, you will usually find filters that are applicable to computers, such as certain operating systems, certain hard drive sizes, certain memory capacities, things like that. Versus if you were to turn around and shop for televisions, and then you're going to see other types of filters, such as screen sizes and contrast ratios, and just kind of things like that. That idea or that concept is what's known as guided navigation. By having these set up for the benefit of guided navigation, it allows your customers, when you're shopping online, to filter by their value of choice. So in the case of finishes, remembering that this is kind of specific to my band instruments and things like that, or appliances. Let's say someone is shopping on TriTech University's website for a new washer and dryer combo, and they want to make sure that they are a stainless finish or just kind of things like that. By having that as a value for that attribute on those inventory items, that becomes a searchable and filterable function. So that's the basic gist. If there's any questions on that, definitely let me know. But that's basically what it boils down to when it comes to this whole attribute concept. And you may have noticed that on the value field here, there's a web sort order. Like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically you can then choose what order those show up in when your customers are browsing the website. So that's the basic gist of it when it comes to attributes. There are also customer attributes. We'll probably talk about those more in another webinar, but it's the same basic idea. There are special fields that you can set up for your customers so you could track other details like spouses or other things like that. Now, when it comes to adding inventory into the system with these attributes in mind, you can set those up as you're adding new inventory into the program. So if we go into the modules menu, into inventory, into add change inventory, and into adding a new inventory record from scratch. This will come up momentarily. There we go. So let's say we are putting in a new appliance. So it's going to be a, let's say, serialized item. It's going into the appliances category. And let's say it's a refrigerator. And it's manufactured by, do I have an appropriate manufacturer here? Let's go ahead and just say it's Maytag. And we're going to go ahead and say yes to keeping Maytag as a manufacturer. And it is the Fridge 5000 extraordinaire. So yes, we're just going to leave that as is for the description of refrigerators. So getting down to the nitty gritty, and I've covered a lot of this in the inventory webinar that I did a little bit ago. Feel free to check that out as far as just keying in an item from scratch. The main thing here is, because I have selected the category of appliances and the subcategory of refrigerators, when I come over to this attributes tab and I click on that, you can see I now have finish as a choice. I can select from any of my existing values like stainless, brass, or silver, or if necessary, I can go ahead and type in my own value if it's not already on that list. Let's just go ahead and keep it as stainless for my example. That is one way of keying that in. You can see that when I saved on that attributes button is now showing in bold, reminding me that I have keyed in an attribute for it. And then if I click proceed, all those details that were filled in on the main tab get dispersed to the other tabs of SKUs and locations and so forth. And on the SKUs tab, you can see I now have that attribute filled in with stainless. The other function with attributes, and this also kind of ties back into version 11 and older is the whole idea of, let's say this Fridge 5000 model line comes in multiple finishes, not just stainless, but also black and silver and et cetera, et cetera. With the latest updates now to version 12, you can now click this auto button. And essentially what this allows you to do is take the attributes that are applicable to that type of category, and you can come in here and you can fill in the attribute value as well as a suffix to get tagged on to the end of that SKU. So let's say that it comes in stainless, and we're going to put in SS for that. I'm just going to hit enter to add that. You can see it's adding the Fridge 5000 SS for stainless. Let's say it also comes in black, and we're just going to put BL for that one. And then let's just go ahead and say silver, and we'll just put an S for that one. So you can see it's essentially generating SKUs for me, with basically using the SKU and model as like a base, and then adding whatever I put in as the suffix at the end of that. If there were multiple attributes for this category, I can select which attribute I am kind of fleshing out, and then it would actually build on multiple suffixes so that this would then generate exponential numbers of appropriate SKUs. So if this also had, let's say, a size attribute, and it came in, let's say, normal size and counter depth, that would be an attribute all of its own, which might have an N and a CD. And then instead of having 3 SKUs, I would have 6 SKUs. So the 3 variables, or the 3 values for the finish attribute, as well as the 2 variables for the size attribute. And then it would just generate however many SKUs are necessary for fleshing out all the different variants that this particular model of fridge comes in. In prior versions, if you're coming to us from older versions, we used to refer to this as the color size matrix, because this was kind of specific to color and size attributes, what we now would call attributes. So now in version 12, you have the ability to establish whatever variants you need based on whatever attributes you're establishing. There's a question coming in, are there other things that can be saved from this screen? For example, how I added Maytag as a new manufacturer. Technically, yes, there are, Kara. Hi, by the way, hope you're doing well. You'll probably want to check out the other webinar I did, but just as another quick example, you can right-click on the primary vendor field here, where you can then add a vendor on the fly by right-clicking, showing a selection grid where you got your existing vendors, and then you could add a vendor from here. So there's a quick way of adding vendors as you go. Manufacturers and vendors are probably the 2 main things that you can kind of add on the fly, as it were. So hopefully that makes sense. And again, hope you're doing well, Kara. So because I already saved this or hit proceed with that, it's just letting me know that if I proceed with this, it's gonna essentially reestablish those SKUs. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say yes to that. So you can see that now on the SKUs tab, I now have my brand new 3 SKUs here with their appropriate attribute values already filled in. About all that would be left to do would be, if there are kind of specific barcodes for all these different combinations of SKU variants, you can just come over in here and scan those in. Hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of the basic gist with attributes. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now the other big, what's the word I'm looking for? The other big advantage with attributes is these are now all searchable. So if I were to go back to the display inventory, and let's say I'm searching in that category of appliances, subcategory refrigerators, and I'm just basically looking for anything that is established as stainless. I can basically type that in and hit search, and then that will go ahead and find whatever has that variable filled in. So you can see in here, it's coming up with that refrigerators. Notice how there's really nothing in here that mentions stainless, but that's because it's in the variant. And you can see here in the SKUs dropdown or in the SKUs column, this particular SKU is a variant SKU, which means I can come over here to the variants tab, and there is my stainless SKU right there. So then from here, I could pull that into point of sale if I was in point of sale and looking it up this way. A relatively new function in here as well in version 12 and the latest updates is you can now, from display inventory, you could click the edit button to go straight to the change inventory screen from here if there were a detail about this that you needed to adjust. So just some quick little extra functions here with the latest updates to version 12. So hopefully that is making sense. Now, there are a limited number of reports. Actually, I can't really think of too many off the top of my head where these are then able to be reported on. I think one of them might be like, for example, the inventory count by category. Yes, so with inventory count by category as a report, down here you can see that if you wanted to run a specific inventory report for a specific attribute, you can make a selection here, and then depending on which attribute you select, you can see there are values, whatever values have been filled in either on the value tab or just any values that have been filled in at all for that attribute on any SKU. You could then browse and search by those values. So depending on what report you're looking at, there are reports that can take advantage of those attributes as well. So those are essentially the key advantages and things that you'll want to be thinking about when you are looking to take advantage of the new attributes function within version 12. Like I was saying, basically the sky's the limit when it comes to whatever attributes you'd like to establish. By the way, if anyone is keeping track of how many times I've said attributes during this past 20 minutes, I'd love to find out. But yeah, if there's any questions or anything that you have when it comes to attributes, I'd be more than happy to answer those. Otherwise, yeah, there's not too much more that I really had prepared when it comes to the attribute functions. Oh, one other thing actually that I do want to make sure I mention, barcode labels. So when it comes to barcode labels, you can, if you're still seeing my screen, you should be able to be still seeing my screen. You can use those attributes on your printed barcode labels. The way that works is in your label setup here. So maintenance, inventory, and setup barcode labels. Depending on your label style that you're using, I'm just going to use this one here, our most common style that we sell. You can print out pretty much anything you want on your labels. And if you would like to pull in an attribute for the purposes of printing on a label, you can do so. It's going to be dependent on where that attribute is in the order on the subcategory. So keep that in mind. For example, if I click the add button here and I can click on this drop down, and if I go up to the top, you can see there are options here for attributes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, all the way up to basically attribute 10. And of course, the way that that's working, it's going 1 and 10, and then 2 and 3 and 4, et cetera. Now you might be wondering, well, what's attribute 1? What's attribute 5? If we look at the subcategory settings here on the subcategories, and we take a look at the attributes tab per subcategory. In the case of band instruments, there's only one selected, so that is attribute 1. If I go to, let's see, what was one that had multiples set up? I think the firearms, wasn't it? Let's see, where's my firearms? Nope, they just have one as well. But basically, whichever ones are selected, and then whatever order they're in on this selection, that is the attribute value that will be looked at here in the where am I at? There I am. In this this order here. So you might be wondering, well, how can I rearrange those? You can then here back in the subcategory settings, you can click this set priority order. Let's just go ahead and for the purposes of kind of talking about this, I'm gonna go ahead and check mark size here for this whole house vacuums category that I was on. Let's say I want size to be attribute 1 and color to be attribute 2. I can click on this set priority order button. Of course, I have to save my change first. And then I can drag size to be above color. And that would then mean that for the purposes of the barcode label, size is attribute 1, color is attribute 2. So I hope that made sense. Again, if there's any questions, let me know. Same concept pretty much applies for the purposes of customer attributes. I don't know if there's much in the way of labels, but there will be similar settings where one attribute has priority over another when we're talking about customer accounts. So hopefully that made sense. Again, thank you so much for attending these webinars. The feedback has been phenomenal, and I know a lot of people are excited on seeing the webinars coming out on a regular basis. So definitely let me know if there are any topics that you'd like to see me cover in a future webinar. On our page where we have all of the existing webinar recordings and where you're registering for these upcoming webinars, you can count on me to pretty much be redoing all of the old webinar videos so that they're now updated with all the latest changes and style updates and things like that. Excuse me. But I'll be also interspersing brand new webinars wherever I can, like last week's non-inventory webinar. That was never before done. So if you got any suggestions, definitely let me know. You can drop me a line at training@tritechretail.com. I'll be more than happy to take your suggestions and see what I can do to make that happen. We've got 2 webinars coming up. Well, 3 webinars coming up in February, all about menu structure for both the touchscreen or basically your normal navigation. These menus here, what we call the touchscreen menus. Let me just kind of close out these windows here. So I believe that is the first webinar in February, the first, or rather the second Tuesday. We'll be talking about how to customize these menus. The week after that, the Thursday, we'll be looking at point of sale menus. And then we'll be wrapping up February with just using point of sale in general when it comes to version 12. So again, kind of more of like a what's new in version 12. We'll be taking a look at that. And if you're coming again from version 11, I definitely encourage you to check these out because you'll find out lots of great ways of streamlining version 12 to fit your needs. So thanks again. I do see a question coming in here from Josh. Can that get changed to just say which attribute it is rather than going back and forth to figure them out? I would love for that to be the case, Josh. However, just because of the nature of the beast with those, I'm assuming you're talking about the barcode label setup where it's just saying attribute 1 or 2. Basically, just because those labels can accommodate a variety of subcategories, it kind of is what it is. You can always take that list and kind of print them out if you'd like, and then you can rearrange them so that way you always know what's in attribute 1 and what's in attribute 2 and things like that. So when it all comes down to it, this is pretty much going to be a one-time setting. Once you've got it set up the way you want it to go, you're rarely going to be spending any time in the maintenance menu. So yeah, it is a little bit of for lack of a better term, a pain, just because we are talking about nondescript values of attribute numbers versus actual attribute names. But once you do get it set up, you're going to be good to go. So if there's anything else that we can do for you, drop us a line. If there's any questions at all, you could always give our support team a call. We're more than happy to help out any way that we can. thank you once again for your time and your attention. I certainly don't take it for granted, and we certainly appreciate all of the years of business that you've given to us, and we can only do our best to turn around and provide you the best possible product to grow yours. Thanks so much once again, and we will see you in the beginning of February. Take care.